Okay, now let's start because we have a lot of things to say and discuss, and the time is a tyrant. So I want to start this seminar with a quotation from the Itinerarium from the by the William of Roebuck, where in this specific passage the Franciscan friar described indirectly the Islamic diffusion in the Golden Horde, with the conversion to Islam of Barkā, the first Muslim and the first Chinese ruler to convert to Islam. But this process of Islamization is also characterized by a lack of written sources. Indeed, despite the importance of this event, religious literature production remains surprisingly limited. But the Qalandarnāma, the book of the Qalandar by Abū Bakr Qalandar Rūmī, emerged as a fundamental resource to shed new light on the Islamization of the Golden Horde during the 14th century. So today we'll see four different topics. The first one will focus on the figure of Qalandar Rūmī and of course on the manuscript, the Qalandarnāma. The second one will focus on the connection and relationship between Qalandar Rūmī and the Jewish power. The third one will focus on the Sufi and Islamic mysticism in the 13th and 14th century, 13th and 14th century within the manuscript. And the last one will focus on the Sufi experience of Qalandar Rūmī in Crimea with the Ushaqi Tariqa. Of course, here we have a map of the Golden Horde, and today I bring this one. Today, we will focus on two different regions, the Crimean Peninsula and, of course, the Anatolia. And we'll see in a few minutes why I use these two different regions. Now, few words on the studies on the Qalandarnāma. As you can see, the first study is on within the collection of Oriental manuscript at the Ūzbek Academy in Tashkent. But the first researcher to dedicate a study or a note, a few lines on this manuscript is, of course, David Davies in his Islamization Native Religion in the Golden Horde. And then we'll see other articles by David Davies and quotation and study by Andrew Peacock in his Fundamental Islam, Literature and Society in Mongol Anatolia. And then we also have articles by the Golden Horde Review based in Kazan. Finally, we have also a quotation of the Qalandarnāma by the last work of Bruno de Nicola, of course, the Chubanids of Kastamonu, Politics, Patronage and Religion in 13th century Anatolia. So let's start immediately with the description of the sources. The Qalandarnāma is a written Persian compendium of Sufi teachings produced between 1320 and 1360, and it is a part of the Mathnavī literary genre, certainly inspired by the Mathnavī of Jānībek Khān. The sole extant manuscript copy, produced shortly after the original, highlights the diffusion of Islam and presumably Sufism in the Golden Horde Crimea during the 14th century. And it encompasses Sufi teachings, practices, stories, and biographies of mystical figures, especially from Anatolian Peninsula. The Qalandarnāma survived in one copy, which is now preserved in Al-Biruni Institute in Tashkent. The manuscript is contained in a simple cardboard cover bound with leather, and it comprises 400 folios in 5 bound volumes. The interior, restored in the modern era, is well preserved and exhibits high legibility. Composed entirely in Persian with the incorporation of Arabic terms, the manuscript lacks any visual ornamentation. The Qalandarnāma consists of 852 chapters, characterized by an initial title, the so-called rubrica, that anticipate the topic of the single chapter. This rubrica, like the body of the text, as we will see in a few minutes, has a vermilion red color. And each first folio of the books reported the basmala, written in the upper part of the folio. The first four, here we have the composition of every single book. So we have three chapters in the first book, 261 chapters in the second, and so on. And the last book, the book 5, includes also the colophon of the manuscript. Here we have the redactional story of the manuscript written in a particular chapter of the Daftar 5, the 5th book. So the first 4 books were written during the Khanate of Ūzbek Khān between 1320 and 1341, while the book 5 was written during the reign of his heir and second son, Jānībek Khān, as indicated in this chapter, in chapter 127. Start from here and finish directly here. And also you can see the body of the text with black ink and the title, the rubrica, in red ink. Here we have the entire translation of the chapters. So we can read that explanation that the 4 books of the Qalandarnāma were written in the time of the just king Ūzbek Khān, may the mercy of Allah be upon him, in the city of Kiram. So in the city of Kiram, it was the capital city of the Jewish Emirate of Crimea. And the 5th book and the time of Sultan Mahmud Jalal al-Din Jānībek Khān, may Allah perpetuate his reign. So also starting from the title, we know that during the writing of this book, Jānībek Khān was still alive. In fact, this is the title, the praise, may Allah perpetuate his reign. So starting from the first line, we read that because the Lord is coming with me, and the Lord will see that is one of the main topic of the entire work, this Qalandarnāma was founded. Poetry and prose read through me fluently, and so on. Is the mystery of the mystery, the knowledge of the knowledge, because it is from it. The core of the core is this word in the center of the shell. Love, in line 5, we see, love made us such a teaching. It says, speak, O Qalandar, every time. And then we'll see why Qalandar Rūmī chose this title. Everything was into his knowledge. Show it to the Murids without discussion. So also from the second mistake of line 6, we see that Qalandar Rūmī, Abū Bakr Qalandar Rūmī had students, had muridun, to show the Qalandarnāma. In fact, the first line described and praised the Qalandarnāma. In line 8, in verse 8, we read that this is the book of the travelers, of course, the spiritual travelers. And starting from line 10, we see that we read that this book was written during the time of Ūzbek Khān, during the reign of the chosen king, who was a true Khan, righteous king with equity and justice, with faith, good morality, and noble heart. And continue with line, also in line 13 and line 12, pure body, pure soul, and pure faith. Jānībek Khān Uzbek was one of the chosen kings. The soul and the spirit of Ūzbek Khān disappeared because it was a well heard. So also here we read that Ūzbek Khān was dead during the writing of this text. Line 70, we read also 4 books in that noble time during the era of such a gentle Khan, Ūzbek Khān. And also indicate that this book, the Qalandarnāma, is the candle of all mystics. This book is for the devotees. Here we can read that in line 25, we spoke about Qalandarnāma spoke about the writing of the book 5, the 5th book in the time of Jānībek Khān, the poetry and prose of which are so beautiful and running water. And continues with other praise to Jānībek and to praise to the Qalandarnāma. So we read also that from the nationalist government, the 4th book in this case was added to 5, so the 5 was added to the 4th, just for the metrical poetry. And what did it say? It said, all living and ancient, all knowing, most merciful and generous. So the praise to Allah. So here we read that also in line 33, if the whole world prays for the Khan, they do with heart, with soul and faith. He deserves without doubt and supposition, truly by Allah, and then by Allah, Jānībek Khān. So in this case, Qalandar Rūmī indicates us that during the writing of this book, again, Jānībek Khān was still alive. Let's continue with the colophon. In fact, indeed, the Qalandarnāma copy is completed with the colophon located on folio 400. It is placed within a circle rendered in red ink, with the body of the text in vermilion red ink, the same color used for the titles. The colophon of the Qalandarnāma presents the blessings addressed to Allah by the copyist of this manuscript, Shaykh Bayazid al-Shaqi al-Samarini, completed with various supplications for forgiveness and benevolence. Indeed, we can read, the book was completed with the help of Almighty God in the hands of the weak, poor, and deplorable servant, Shaykh Bayazid al-Shaqi al-Samarini. May Allah increase his poverty and grant him success. Amen. Dated in the blessed month of Shaban in the year 761, so in the 1360 of the Christian era. The only information pertaining to the biography of the copies is found only in this colophon of the work. The title of the Laqab indicates the copy's membership of the Sufi path, the Tariqa, founded by Qalandar Rūmī, the Shakya, as we can see later. Whose history and thought will be so below. Indeed, the onomastic referring the nisba, referring the copy's place of origins, indicate that it was originally from the city of Samarin. Devin David suggests that it might refer to the city of Samara in the mid-Volga region. Instead, the Russian translation, because we have also a Russian translation of the whole text, edited in 2017, they proposed the village of Samarin close to Ardabil in Iranian Azerbaijan, or at the same time the village of Shamrin in the Salmas district of the western province of Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, despite this colophon, there is no information on what happened to the manuscript once the copying work was completed in this year, in 1360. Within the frontispiece of the Qalandarnāma and the folio 1 of book 1, the names of 3 different owners of the manuscript have been reported before it was purchased at the Al-Biruni Institute in Tashkent. So for this manuscript, we have a black hole of 500 years, because we know nothing about this manuscript, nothing about its story. So we know that it was completed in that year, in the 1360. And then we know from these names of 3 different owners, we know that come back in the knowledge of us in the last years of the 19th century. So, as stated previously, the Qalandarnāma can be considered a Sufi companion with a moral and ethical purpose. Furthermore, the Qalandarnāma is rich in reference to the Persian mystical literary tradition. The first chapter of each book offers praise to Allah through the concept of unity and oneness, the Tawhid, and also story and praise to the Prophet Muhammad and the first 4 caliphs. But the main theme of this source is certainly the concept of the mystical love, the Ishq. Qalandar Rūmī dedicates more than 50 chapters in all 5 books of the Qalandarnāma to this topic. Beyond the central theme of Ishq, Qalandar Rūmī, echoing in particular Jalal-ad-Din Rumi Mathnavī, incorporates a set of stories, allegories, and admonition from this text. The relationship between the Shaykh and the Murid emerges also as another significant theme present in the Qalandarnāma. This particular topic suggests Qalandar Rūmī's direct interest in the structure and transmission of Sufi knowledge to these Muridun, as we also see in the previous chapter, where Qalandar Rūmī indicates the production of and writing of the 5 books of the Qalandarnāma. So now let's talk about the authors of the Qalandarnāma. Of course, here we have, this is not, of course, Qalandar Rūmī, because we have no information except the Qalandarnāma. So the only information Qalandar Rūmī is, of course, in his Qalandarnāma. We have no sources that report any reference to Qalandar Rūmī or his Sufi path, the Ushakiyan, as we will see later. It is possible to reconstruct his origins and his biography only from his nisba and his laqab. So he's nominated Qalandar. He connected to the Sufi movement characterized by wandering, antinomianism, and transgressing any social norms or values, the famous Qalandars. Some Qalandars were used to dress animal skins, wear earrings and iron pendants, or practice acts of mortification of the body. Other Qalandars instead were used to shave their hair, beard, mustache, and eyebrows. Of course, Qalandar Rūmī was centrally inspired by the Qalandars, with whoever ever adopting, according to the interpretation of the Qalandar, of course, their extreme and antisocial practices. This is for the Lakab. For the Nisma, Qalandar Rūmī, Nisma indicates he was born in Aksaray, an important commercial and political center in the Seljuk Anatolia, as also stated in chapter 154 of book 4, where it is indicated as Pir Qalandar Rūmī al-Hummi al-Aksaray. So the master, the Sheikh Qalandar Rūmī, the illiterate of Aksaray. So that's why when I start this seminar, this presentation, I indicate to you the regions of the Crimean Peninsula and the Anatolian Peninsula. So this is the biography and the story of the manuscript, and this is the end of the first part. Now we move to the second part of the seminar, dedicated to the relationship between Qalandar Rūmī and the Khans and the Jewish court of the Golden Horde. In this source, we have not only a reference to Sufi teachings, as we see, in perfect line with the Sufi literature of the 13th and 14th centuries. The Qalandarnāma is a part of the panegyric and narration dedicated to the Chinggis rulers, who converted to Islam, of course. Dedicating some of the chapters to the progenitor Genghis Khan and the rulers Ūzbek Khān and Jānībek Khān, with also the Crimean Jewish emirs Tuluk Timur and Kutuk Timur, Qalandar Rūmī fits perfectly into the context of the Sufi Shaykh and dervishes close to the Chinggis court. Furthermore, Qalandarnāma chapters help us to understand the Sufi point of view of a part, of course, of the Crimean Islamic community towards the Chinggis and Jewish power. So, now we'll start with the progenitor Genghis Khan. According to the Qalandarnāma, Qalandar Rūmī dedicated one entire chapter to Genghis Khan, the chapter 170 of book 3. So the chapter dedicated to Genghis Khan starts here and finish here, of course. This chapter consists of 23 verses that focus on the conquest by Genghis Khan as the manifestation of divine will, introducing as his guide as a Sufi Shaykh, Muhammad al-Yallam, in an attempt to explain the causes of the Genghis Khan conquest and the fall of the Dar al-Islam, or the Islamic world, of course. So this is the part of the Qalandarnāma, the body of the Qalandarnāma, and here we have the translation of the text. So the first part of the text of the chapter tells us that the conquest of the Islamic world by Genghis Khan. And the first line indicates very well the symbol was Genghis Khan. This was a symbol of Allah's wrath. It was the conqueror of the world without any doubt. The wrath of Allah came from the Mongols, from the Mughals in Persia, just as the sun shone from the land of Khatam. So here, Qalandar Rūmī used the term Khatam to indicate the land of the Mongols. From Khatam to Konya, he conquered everything, seeking out the peoples of the world. So the chapter continues with the description of the conquest of the world by Genghis Khan. Here, for example, in line 5, we see that many sheikhs and mufti were killed by the sword of Genghis Khan. And in line 11, we find the main causes of the wrath of Allah. We read that since they secretly turned, so in this case, Qalandar Rūmī referred to the Muslim kings and emirs, since they secretly turned their face away from Allah, know that these kinds of things happen to them. So this is the main causes of the disruption of the Islamic world. The chapter continues with the conquest of the world by Genghis Khan, and from line 16, we find finally this new element for the history, the Sufi history of the Mongol conquest. In this case, we have the figure of Pir Muhammad Yallah, that showed to Genghis Khan, of course, the way to conquest the world, of course. That is how we could conquer land by force and make lions, tigers, and elephants like ants. What is so hidden Genghis Khan, in this case, Pir Yallah saw hidden Genghis Khan, was a progeny from his loins of many kings. Some of his sons would become believers, happy and devoted rulers they would become. And they would become defenders of the Sharia of warfare. They would pave the way for goods and riches for the religion. In this case, Qalandar Rūmī says that these, of course, these kings, this progeny from these loins, were, of course, Ūzbek Khān, Jānībek Khān, and the Muslim kings of the Chinggisic world. Therefore, through these verses dedicated to Genghis Khan, Qalandar Rūmī hence presents an exiled Sufi as an important spiritual guide to the Chinggis rulers, and placing maybe himself as a guide for the Jewish dynasty. Although there is no other historical reference regarding the figure of Muhammad Yallah, it is evident that Qalandar Rūmī attributed a role of primary importance to the Sufis. The presence of Genghis Khan in the Qalandarnāma also had a laudatory task to legitimize and magnify, as we see also in line 20 and from 18 to 20, and magnify the importance of the heirs of the Mongol leader, in this case Ūzbek Khān and Jānībek Khān, describing the Mongol progenitor as the sum and the symbol of the divine will, and legitimating the Jochids as a devout Muslim dynasty. So, starting from Genghis Khan, we move directly to the other Khans present in Qalandarnāma, Ūzbek Khān, the ideal Islamic ruler for Qalandar Rūmī. Indeed, Qalandar Rūmī dedicates several verses on the Qalandarnāma to Ūzbek Khān, including the chapter 118 of Book 3, as we can also see here. Starting from there and finish there, where magnificence, rightness, and sincere faith of the Genghis Khan and his dynasty are exalted through these elegiac couplets, despite its brevity. Notably, it follows immediately after the chapter dedicated to Genghis Khan. This positioning suggests a deliberate choice by Qalandar Rūmī, firmly establishing Ūzbek Khān as the greatest Muslim successor of Genghis Khan, and confirming his position and prestige within the Chinggis lineage. Here we have the chapter dedicated to Ūzbek Khān, in praise of the son of Sultan Muhammad Ūzbek Khān, the guardian of the reign of God eternal, sincere to Islam, king of the believers, a devoted in the Sharia and the religion of Mustafa, so Muhammad, in love with the prophets and Wali. The Khans of Khans were in line 6. The Khans of Khans is our Ūzbek Khān. Truly know him a Wali from Awliya, so is a saint from the saints. The kingdom, so the Golden Horde, or the Ulus of Juchi, is entirely safe thanks to his justice. The wolf is taken again with the lamb. Is a king afraid of God, he will never give his consent to injustice, and so on. So we say, and we can say that in this case, Qalandar Rūmī give a lot of praise to Ūzbek Khān using only Islamic title for Uzbek. So in the title Qalandarnāma, we have no other title than Islamic titles. Also, so if we have this, in this case, Ūzbek Khān, we also the same title, the same praise, and the same leitmotiv. So, in the chapter dedicated to the second son and heir of Ūzbek Khān, Jānībek Khān, in chapter 8 of book 4. Here we have the very brief chapter dedicated to Jānībek, the Muslim warrior. Here we have the chapter dedicated to the translation of the chapter dedicated to Jānībek. We can see that it is the son of justice, the shadow of Allah, the king of kings, moon of moons, Jānībek Khān, the manifestation of the grace of the eternal God. So we can find the same Islamic title, the same leitmotiv used for Ūzbek Khān, also for Jānībek Khān in this case. In line 5, just nominated the Prophet Dawood, just to indicate the ruggedness of Jānībek Khān. and he gives justice to the people, young people, and children. But also we have not only the Islamic title, but also a reference to the conquest of Genghis Khan. We read in line 10, in verses 10, he conquered from Khita to the borders of Rome. If you remember, see that Genghis Khan conquered from Khita, in the case, to Konya. From Jānībek, we have from Khita to the borders of Rome. So we have a connection between Genghis Khan and Jānībek Khān to exalt and praise the figure of the Genghis Khan. In fact, during the writing of this book, the book 4 and also the book 5, Jānībek Khān was alive. So you can also maybe see and read this part. So that's why I chose the title, The Muslim Warrior, for Jānībek Khān. So through these verses, Qalandar Rūmī uses several Islamic titles to describe and exalt these Genghis Khans. Ūzbek Khān and Jānībek are indicated as the guardians of the king or the god, as we see now. According to Qalandar Rūmī, the concept of a divine kingdom could be interpreted also similarly as a representation of the Golden Horde. Qalandar Rūmī's verses on these Khans exclusively employ titles and terminology from Islamic tradition. And this portrayal suggests the potential influence of Islamic ideas on political legitimacy in the Golden Horde, according to Qalandar Rūmī's perspective through his Qalandarnāma. So here we have Ūzbek Khān, Jānībek Khān. Finally, we have other two interesting chapters dedicated to the chapters 128 and 129 of Book 5 that present the panegyric on the Crimean Juchid emirs, Tuluk Timur and Kutluk Timur. And we know these two emirs also because they are indicated and described by Ibn Battuta, in his Rila, when his travel in the Golden Horde territories in the first year of the 14th century. So here we have the two chapters dedicated to these two emirs, starting from here, page 362 of the manuscript, until there. Here we have the first chapter dedicated to Tuluk Timur. Of course, also in this case, we have a lot of praise and Islamic title to indicate the figure of this emir. He was a friend, he was with the fakir, he was together in companionship, as I will read in line 5. And also in line 1, Qalandar Rūmī indicates that in Crimea there is one of emir with a poor soul. So the name of the Crimea still return in the verses of the Qalandarnāma. That's why it's so important that the Crimean Peninsula for this work and this author and shaykh. In line 12, we read that emir was from Sharia with consciousness. In the Tariqa, he was a very incomparable devotee. So more than Ūzbek Khān and Jānībek Khān, Tuluk Timur was a very devoted, and probably he was a member of a Sufi Tariqa. Of course, we can say anything about this just from this simple line. Is it possible that also that Tuluk Timur was a member of a Tariqa, but we know which Tariqa Qalandar Rūmī referred. Indeed, it was a knower of the truth and a guide of the road, so excellent it was my emir in that manner. We read my emir. In this case, Qalandar Rūmī is not referred to Tuluk Timur, but the other emirs. And we see also in the line 17, O emir, brave and faithful, look what your father left on your hand. In this case, Qalandar Rūmī is referring to, is talking with Kutluk Timur, and is narrating the history of his father, his praise to his father. And we have another particular, new particular of great interest, that's the death by the infidels, I suppose the Genoese or the Latins, that killed and made him a martyr on the top of that rude mountain, quite huge. We have this information. We not have the same information from the Rila of Battuta, for example. Here instead we have the verses dedicated to the Emir Kutluk Timur, and in this case we repeat, Qalandar Rūmī repeated the same title, the same Islamic title, and same praise to these emirs. Line 3 is very interesting, indicate the Seljuk origins of this emir, and in line 5 we have again the Sharia is a scholar and a practical one, Tariq is a spiritual traveler and a full herd. So we have the same things again in this case. Also, we have whichever emir that from Crimea appears, this our emir is better than them. And the chapter contains all other praises and blessing from Qalandarnāma. May his generosity in the end, we say that may his generosity always be strong until the firmament rotates night and day. His house with all family may be far from disaster, suffering, and hardships. So in this case, Kutluk Timur was still alive during the writing of these verses. So to conclude this second part, this Qalandarnāma chapters dedicated to Genghis Khan, the Khan of the Khans of the Golden Horde, and also the Juchid emirs of Crimea, show a precise relationship and affinity of Qalandar Rūmī with the Golden Horde power. With the exception of Genghis Khan as a symbol of divine wrath, the remaining 4 chapters present the same leitmotif, centered on the magnificence of the Juchid rulers and their sense of justice, expression of their Islamic faith. Moreover, it's interesting to know that Qalandar Rūmī emphasizes Khan's Islamic faith and the relation with Sufis in different occasions in the text, in order to underline the deep connection between the rulers and the Sufis. Finally, according to these verses, it's clear that the affiliation or the supporting of Qalandar Rūmī towards the Juchid power. So in this case, we have not a pure antinomian Qalandar, as we indicate in the description of the biography of Qalandar Rūmī, but a stronger supporter of the power and the society of his time. So this is what is have from these verses from the Qalandarnāma dedicated to these historical figures. Now we move to the part 3 of this seminar. So we know that the Qalandarnāma reports and exalts significant Sufi figures and groups, encompassing both established Sufi tariqas and individual mystics, especially from Anatolian Sufism. Notably represented are the Maulawis of Jalal Rumi and Sultan Balad, the Qalandari path of Jamal al-Din Sawi, the Aidari path of Qutb al-Din Aidar Zawai, and also we have verses dedicated to Saris al-Tuq and Barak Baba, the Sheikh of the Mongols. And also we can read, I just want to tell you about we don't see today, that in the Qalandarnāma there is a lot of reference and verse and chapter dedicated to Akhi Evran and to the Akhi movement, or to Akhi group, and also with verses dedicated to another Akhi Ajab Shirkuli, because Qalandar Rūmī gives a lot of importance to the concept of Futuwat in his verses, and we all know that the Akhis were not Sufis or mystical, but just want to tell you that the importance of this, especially Anatolian Akhis, were in Abū Bakr Qalandar Rūmī's mysticism and talk. So furthermore, the mystical experience, we have a lot of several chapters dedicated to early Sufis, such as Bayazid Baistami, Maruf al-Qarqi, and of course Mansur al-Alaj, and also reported and exalted. The prominent inclusion of these figures in the Qalandarnāma, alongside the renowned figures of the Persian mystical poetry like Sanai Ghaznavi and Farid al-Din Attar, not only highlights the doctrinal and mystical background of Qalandar Rūmī, but also broadens our understanding of the prevalent, according to the Qalandarnāma of course, Sufi and mystical teachings in the Golden Horde Crimea during the first half of the 14th century. Furthermore, but today we'll not see, unfortunately, lesser known Anatolian shaykhs and dervishes are celebrated and praised in the Qalandarnāma verses. such as Khaja Erzurum Abdal, Khaja Sadr al-Din Mughal of Konya, the Sheikhs Bakhtiar Abdal, and Mahmud Bildar of Aksaray. Just a few names of these Anatolian sheikhs and dervishes. So start with the first movement, the Qalandar movement. Here we have the first quatrain that's indicate and show us the figure of the Qalandar. I'm the vagabond whom they call Qalandar. I have no provision nor refuge nor harbor. During the day I travel around, and at night I sleep with my head on the ground. This is a verse from the 11th century. So the main theme present in the Qalandar-nāma verses is certainly the pursuit of mystical union with God through the Qalandari path, serving as a source to the circulation of ideas and narratives associated with the Qalandari movement during the 13th and 14th century. The topos of the Qalandar as an embodiment of freedom and liberation appears in the Qalandarnāma instead of the antinomian figure that we seen before. Here, the Qalandar is no longer synonymous with blame, heterodox beliefs, and the subversion of social norms. Instead, they represent the absolute freedom and liberation from all hypocrisy and materiality. According to Qalandar Rūmī, the Qalandari path stands out as one of the prominent Sufi way for achieving complete devotion to Allah, such as indicated by Attar Jalaluddin Rumi, that viewed the Qalandar as the ideal devoted mystic, a dervish completely intoxicated by God's love. Now move from the first or one of the most important Qalandar of the 13th century, Jamal al-Din Sawi, that stands as a pivotal figure in the emergency and formative years of the Qalandari Tariqa. He was active in the first half of the 13th century, and he left a significant mark on this dervish movement, in particular during his time in Damascus and Damietta, according to his biography, the Manaqib Jamal al-Din Sawi, and also in the Qalandarnāma. Al-Sawi is also credited as one of the founder. Is not a real founder, but a sort of reorganizer of the Qalandari movement into a tariqa, establishing core principle and regulation. In this case, chapter 243 of the Qalandarnāma show the geographical portrayal of Jamal al-Din Sawi, while also offering insight into Qalandari practices. Through al-Sawi's stories, the text explored the concept of divine love as an untouchable force that necessitated a rejection of social norms and religious hypocrisy within the Islamic Ummah. So here we have the chapter dedicated to Jamal al-Din Sawi. Here we have the translation of the chapter. And of course, starting from the line 1, when Jamal Sawi became in love, so the return at the post of love, the mystic love. He became worthy to the door and the court of the true, to God. He abandoned all this and denied himself, except for the pure beloved. He trampled everything. He sought science, both infamy. So he became a Qalandar. The veil of honor from both was lacerated. He burned the patched garment and prayer robe. Then he burned himself like a candle. In this case, we have also a return of one of the most famous leitmotif of the Sufi literature, the candle, the candle, and used with also the other famous figure of the moth, so the candle with the moth. In this case, we have just a candle. Here, in line 6, we have one of the most important practices of the Qalandari Tariqa by Sawi. He gave up his beard, eyebrows, and hair, the char zarb, the full shave. No one else did this action except him. He refused the dignity of an imamate. From eternity to death, he went searching. Again, suddenly love came to him. Whatever he had became beloved and above. Such a great peer and authority, he stepped firm in the blame. Maybe all of you know the story of Al-Sawi. He was a great peer, he was a great sheikh, a young sheikh in Damascus. And then when he visited the cemetery of Damascus he saw a naked sheikh, and then he decided to leave all his glory, all his authority, and as also indicated by Qalandar Rūmī, he chose the blame, chose infamy, just to explore himself and also to be intoxicated by God, of God, of course. Each one of the calumnies he turned away. They told him, "Oh, elder, pass away this bad action." So in this second part of the text, we see and read that there is a lot of calumnies, as indicated by Qalandar Rūmī, or attacks against this choice of Qalandar Rūmī, of Jamal al-Din Sawi. The chapter continues with all these blame by the society, by the Shaykh, by the Sufi. And also we read that in this case, line 16, Sheikh Uthman, one of the most famous Shaykh in Anatolia of the 13th century, we told the Sufi, they try to understand, they try to come back with them Al-Sawi from this condition of Qalandar, of blame. And then all to this attack, Al-Sawi answered that is one not ashamed of great and illustrious. He turned away from this support of action. So here we have the description of the life of one of the most prominent Qalandar of the 13th century. Then we have also another chapter dedicated to Jamal al-Din Sawi, that moving from Damascus to Damietta, of course, in the cemetery. And this episode was also reported by Ibn Battuta in his Khila. So, while the Qalandarnāma expressed profound reverence for al-Sawi's unconventional path and his anti-establishment mystical love, it omits any explicit mention of his specific Qalandari practices as foundational elements within Qalandar Rūmī's framework of Islamic mysticism. As already examined in the study of the author's Lakab, the antinomian dynamics typical of the Qalandari movement find no space in the mystical elaboration of Qalandar Rūmī. So we say that Qalandar Rūmī was a great supporter of the power, of Jujit power. It's impossible to find Qalandar Rūmī in a cemetery with his Muridun. Let's continue with the other great Qalandar dervishes of the 13th century, Qutb al-Din Haydari Zawai. The Qalandarnāma dedicates two chapters of Book 2, specifically the chapters 212 and 213, elaborating the various traits that characterize the Haydari Tariq. The first chapter, we'll see here, dedicated praises to Pirzava Qutb al-Din Haydari Zawai and his mystical and ascetic experience in a cave close to Haydar in Khorasan. And the chapter presents him as a perfect example of holiness of a Sufi should pursue to fight the nafs and achieve closeness to God. Qalandar Rūmī positioned Qutb al-Din Haydar as a paragon of the ascetic life, wholly devoted to the contemplation of God. Then we have another chapter in this chapter. The chapter dedicated to Qutb al-Din Haydar is followed by another brief chapter where in the Haydari Tariqa is praises and describing. So we read very quickly that they used to dress iron necklace. Also, they used to wear a felt kaftan and so on. These verses contain Qalandar Rūmī's pronouncement of praise and devotion towards Haydar Zawai and his Tariqa followers. Encountering and embracing the Haydari path is present in verse 1 here as divinely blessed experience. So you will receive mercy from the creator of the universe. Further, and also here in verse 3, as indicated before, the text delineates the defining characteristics of the Haydaris, including the donning of a felt kaftan, the kula, with three flaps. And also we have seen for the iron necklace, a symbol of the belonging to Qutb al-Din Haydar, and the lobed earrings allegorically representing mastery over the nafs, and also a chain around the belt symbolizing the self-control and the rejection of the selfishness in verse 7 and 8. Notably, Qalandar Rūmī omits many practices and customs traditional associated with the Daidaris, such as the bird shaving, braggacies, the ashes consumption, the use of chastity rings, and self-mutilation. This selective portrayal may reflect the author's desire to distance himself from practices deemed extreme and excessive, or alternatively, it might simply signify that such practices were not prevalent within the 13th and 14th century Anatolia and Golden Horde Crimea. Here we have another one, the most important dervishes of the 13th and first year of the 14th century, Barak Baba, the Sheikh of Mongols, who Qalandar Rūmī dedicated this chapter to exalt his sainthood and his miracles. Here we have the chapter dedicated, translated chapter dedicated to Barak Baba. And we know from the different sources like the Sharai Kalimati Shaikh Barak by Kutub al-Alawi or the Tariq al-Jaitu by Abu al-Qasim Abdallah al-Kashani that Barak Baba was a renowned disciple of Saris al-Turk, another one fundamental dervishes of that area of the Black Sea. While no direct affiliation with a specific tariqa is documented for Barak Baba, his reported activities exhibit parallels with the Qalandari path, in particular in his unconventional and potentially transgressive practices. This is the chapter 57 of Book 1, and that indicates the power, the sainthood of Barak Baba. And of course, we have a very interesting particular in the verses 16. That means that that Barak hit Ghazan with a javelin. So from line 16, we have the encounter between Barak Baba and Il-Khanid Ghazan Khan, who converted to Islam and was the mortal enemy of the Golden Horde Khanate. So significantly, the Qalandarnāma portrays Barak Baba as a Wali Allah, a Qalandari saint venerated for his closeness to God. And we said also that thanks to his holiness, he made the tiger like a mouse, he deprived the tiger of his majesty. So we have also a miracle of this Barak Baba. This treatment mirrors the reverence accorded to these figures like Qutb al-Din Haidar Zawahi and Jamal al-Din Sawi. Through this process of normalization of this figure, of this Qalandari figure, and devotional portrayal, Qalandar Rūmī present Jamal al-Din Sawi, Haidar Zawahi, and Barak Baba, the figure who challenged the boundaries of Islamic orthodoxy as worthy of sainthood. So the Qalandarnāma portrayal of Qalandar figures emphasized their spiritual dimension rather than the antinomian practices of the Qalandar. The Qalandarnāma present a tradition that idealized the Qalandars as exemplars of religious freedom and purity, overlooking practices considered derogatory and moral according to the contemporary Islamic norms of the Sharia. However, Qalandar Rūmī it avoids delving into the movement reputation for antinomian and antisocial behavior, as we said before. The Qalandar is understood exclusively on a spiritual level in an attempt to direct the ideal reader to follow this perfect example of self-sacrifice, devotion, and rejection of every hypocritical and worldly practice. So this is the end of the part connected to the Qalandars. Now we move for the last part of 3 of the seminar dedicated to the Malawi Tariqa. So Jānībek Rūmī, and of course, and the founder of the Malawi Tariqa, and the other great Sufi movement that characterized Qalandar mysticism in the Qalandarnāma. However, Qalandar Rūmī was undoubtedly inspired by another fundamental figure of the Malawi Tariqa, Ba'al-Din Muhammad Walad, known as Sultan Walad, the son and the heir of Jānībek Rūmī. Furthermore, Andrew Pico in his studies suggests that Qalandar Rūmī might have been a Malawi dervish who advocated the Qalandarnāma way. So that's why we find praises and connection with both the Malawi and Qalandari Tariqa. Notably, in chapter 105 of book 4, the author praises those who followed the Malawi Tariqa and the teaching of Jānībek Rūmī. He extolled their moral qualities and details some characteristics of the Tariqa itself. As we can see, this is the chapter dedicated to the Malawi, especially to Malawi Tariqa. And here we have the chapter translation of the chapter. So whoever become line 1, whoever becomes a Malawi for the sake of God is inseparable from the Awliya. So if you are a Malawi, you are a saint. We are in the companion with the saint. So in here, the Qalandar Rūmī described also one of the characteristics of the initiation of the Malawi Tariqa. We read in line 5 that the Malawi put a large turban on his head, so for the Molidun, like the crown placed on the heads of Shah. Wore a kirka with 2 beautiful belts. After that, he became a mystic and owner of the earth. Those 2 belts were created for this, to be the sign of the sheikh for the murid. The kirka, the turban, and the belt, and the form. Majestic is the meaning and the morals, and so on. So here we have also description, as we said before, of the Malawi characteristics, but we have not only this chapter dedicated to Malawi Tariqa. Qalandar Rūmī dedicated several chapters in the Qalandarnāma to Jānībek Rūmī, and Sultan Balad exemplifies his profound devotion, especially to Jānībek Rūmī. In particular, one chapter he indicates Jānībek Rūmī as Maulana, so our master. And Qalandar Rūmī, furthermore, weaves a tapestry of stories, allegories, and admonition gleaned from the Diwan and Mathnavī of Jānībek Rūmī, occasionally incorporating verses directly from Jānībek Rūmī works. And but one of the most important, this is the end of the previous chapter. One of the most important chapters of the whole Qalandarnāma is the chapter where Qalandar Rūmī praises Sultan Balad and describes the contact with Sultan Balad in the city of Konya. Here we have the chapter this is the chapter number 174 in the book 2. Where it shows us the fundamental influence of Sultan Balad on Qalandar Rūmī's mysticism. So here we have the chapter where described this fundamental event. Here we see that line 4, when that Sultan, so Sultan Balad, turned his gaze to the slave, all my deeds have become entirely gold. It took innocence and made me time agile. It cleansed my heart and of all suffering. I was illiterate, so the title of Al-Ummi is frequent in the Qalandarnāma to indicate Abū Bakr Qalandar Rūmī, and aware of every word. From his kindness, he turned his gaze toward to me. If I was mute, he made me talk. In every sense, he made me a seeker. So show me the way, line 9, or appear the way, if you know about the secret of Allah. And he continued to praise Sultan Balad and the fundamental moments when Sultan Balad probably talk or probably teach to Qalandar Rūmī. The encounter is nothing short of extraordinary, in fact, indeed, where from verse 4, as we've seen, a simple look bestowed by Sultan Balad is depicted as opening the doors of knowledge, secrets, and mystical rapture for Qalandar Rūmī. This look leaves Abū Bakr Qalandar Rūmī struck, transforming him into a recipient of a secret of the world. So Sultan Balad directs towards Qalandar Rūmī that unveil the secret of the Sufi path. So that's why also Andrew Peacock said that probably Qalandar Rūmī was a member or of the Marawali path of Jānībek Khān and Sultan Balad. So these verses dedicated to the Malawi Tariqa, Jānībek Rūmī, that we don't see today, and also to Sultan Balad, the inspiration from the Mathnavī and Mathnavī due to the Qalandar Rūmī devotion to this text. But also we read here in the chapter dedicated to the Malawi Tariqa, crowns are the words of the Mathnavī. So also in this case, different time Qalandar Rūmī show us his devotion and his knowledge of this text. So these borrowings from Jānībek Rūmī's works suggest a circulation of the Malawi ideas and mystical production in the Golden Horde Crimea, as also documented in the Manaqib al-Rafin, so the history of the Malawi Tariqa. The Malawi Tariqa's expansion began during the Jānībek Rūmī's lifetime, becoming systematic under Sultan Balad's leadership from 1284. It was in this context that Qalandar Rūmī presumably received his formative training, carrying back the teachings he acquired during his time in Konya and the other Anatolian cities. While the Qalandarnāma mentioned a pivotal encounter with Sultan Balad in Konya, it offered no further taste of the presence of established Malawi Taqiyya in the Crimean Peninsula. Indeed, we know nothing about the Malawi in the Golden Crimea or the Golden Horde except for this Qalandarnāma. But just these are just supposition of the presence of the Malawi in the Golden Crimea. Except the Qalandarnāma, indeed, there are no further sources or evidence, as far as we know, of course, to confirm the establishment of Malawi Lodge or even the presence of its member in the Golden Horde territory. While it's impossible to affirm that if Qalandar Rūmī was formally a Mawali Murid, its clear attention to Jānībek Rūmī, Sultan Balad, and their mystical teachings demonstrates the Malawi influence of Qalandar Rūmī's spiritual and mystical formation. Finally, considering Qalandar Rūmī's spiritual alignment with the Malawis and its presumed prominence within the Islamic Jujitsu society, it's possible to hypothesize, the circulation of Malawi teachings in Crimea during that period, possibly even disseminated through a work like the Qalandarnāma. This is my hypothesis, that Qalandarnāma showed to the Muridun, to the Shaykh of the Golden Horde Crimea, the ideas of the Malawi Tariqa. So we have, thanks to these sources, a possibility that the Malawis moved from Anatolia, also they crossed the Black Sea and moved to the Golden Horde Crimea. But this is just supposition. Now we start the last part of this seminar. If I have time, I hope, but I will very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly, because we have 5 minutes.
Very quick, perfect. Okay, so and now I will show you one of the most important chapters of the Qalandarnāma, where is this is the chapter 134 of Book 3, where the Qalandarnāma was elevated in Crimea and to Qalandar Rūmī in 1320, and the Ushaki 5 rules were enunciated. So this is one, I think, I strongly believe that this is the most important chapter of the whole of the entire work. Here we have the translation of the chapter, and of course we read from the line 1, when Abū Bakr Qalandar Rūmī came from it, so he rushed toward mystical meaning, and he showed his form of Shakiyan from the doors of place from the pier, and a new love, again here we have the Ishq, has arrived, a new companion has arrived. And so in this line, Qalandar Rūmī described that the presence and exalt the presence of the Shakiyan, so the lovers, the path of the lovers in Crimea. And also we read in that here, this path in line 11, this path was opened thanks to the spiritual knowledge. So we also know that thanks to the spiritual knowledge of Qalandar Rūmī, this tariqa was probably founded. Here in the line 8 and 9, we have also the characteristics of the Ushakiyan. They used to wear a cotton cloth, a 6-piece hat, and the sandals are our clothing, says Qalandar Rūmī. Canvas clothes are the form of a cloak. This is the garment for the people of Ushaki. So, like the Malawi Tariqa, here for the Ushaki Tariqa, we have also the dress code for the members of Ushaki Tariqa. Another fundamental line versus is the presence, so the concrete and the real existence of the Ushakiyan in Crimea. Here in line 18, where Qalandar Rūmī said that even the Ushakiyan become companions. They run on us like rain. They chose this Ushaki way. They engage this very liberation. So I suppose that there was a real concrete movement or tariqa in the Crimea of that time. So the Ushakiyan are absolute in this tariqa. And here we have the 5 rules that indicate that Qalandar Rūmī indicated to follow the Ushaki path for line 21 to line 26. First, see and be hid. Secondly, be more oppressive with your nafs. So the first and second rules are against the nafs. Third, do go to evildoers. This word is a promise, and this promise is a word, just to emphasize these third rules. Fourth, this is not doing things prohibited by the Sharia, adhere to the Sharia, and wander less from side to side. Here we have a great importance given by Qalandar Rūmī to the Sharia, so to the Islamic law. And the last one, the 5th one, is the service to everyone. So the Ushaki, thanks to these very generic rules, with these rules, the Ushakiyan and the Ushaki way is complete thanks to this. This is our word, and this is our word and our reason. Whoever neglects it is he is an unbeliever. So, just move and just finish for the conclusion and move to the conclusion. So, it's evident that the Qalandarnāma can be considered a direct and fundamental testimony to the religious climate that emerged after the Islamic conversion of Ūzbek Khān. Through the dedication to the Khans and the emirs of the Golden Horde, Qalandar Rūmī presents and legitimizes the group of the Ushakiyan as a spiritual movement perfectly integrated into a social and religious context, such as the Jewish Crimea of the 14th century. Qalandar Rūmī distanced himself, as we've seen before, from the antinomian and antisocial behaviors that characterize the Qalandari groups. Qalandar Rūmī, indeed, proposed a Sufi path based, the Shakya Tariqa path, based on a spiritual and mystical practices that are understandable and accessible to a wider audience, that does not against the rules of the Sharia, but one of the rules is to respect in total the Sharia Islamic law. Finally, by examining the Qalandar Rūmī thoughts and worldview, unfortunately today very quickly, but we need a very in-depth study of this fundamental manuscript, it's possible to identify mystical love, so the ishq, as the true foundational act of the Ushaki community, based on the principle, laws, and teaching proposed through the Qalandarnāma. The author harmonizing approach, because we have Qalandaris, Malawis, Akhis, and other Sufi mystical influence, representing the Qalandarnāma a perfect example of the circulation of a specific Sufi narrative of that time. From the analogies between these differences, it's possible to hypothesize the presence of a common narrative archetype shared by the Qalandarnāma and other sources of that time, such as the Manaqib al-Rafin in relation to the Malawi tradition, and the Manaqib Jamal al-Din al-Sawi in relation to the al-Sawi biography. So, Qalandarnāma reports narrative classified into two different categories. The first category could be identified as official narrative, signifying the presence of narratives within other sources that have become canonical reference points for specific Sufi communities. Their using and circulation became part of a narrative and mystical tradition. It is the case of the hagiographies of Jānībek Khān, Jamal al-Din Sawi, Qutb al-Din Haidar, and so on. The second category could instead be classified as missing narrative, denoting the absence of different and various narration of information from the official or more widely circulated narrative, such as the figure of Sheikh Muhammad Yalla, the history of the Crimean Emir Tuluk Timur and Kutuk Timur, or the various Anatolian mystical figures. So, the Qalandarnāma has a great value in enriching our understanding of specific Sufi groups or the beaches, who would otherwise have remained obscured. Is a fundamental for us for comprehending the process of Islamization of the Golden Horde and the circulation of different Sufi ideas and narration of that time. I'm finished, and thank you so much for your kind attention.